Welcome to the premiere episode of Unchaperoned on Reader Seeks Romance channel. I am Liz Donatelli.
And I'm historical romance author Elizabeth Everett.
On Unchaperoned, we engage historical romance authors in thoughtful discussions about topics and issues relevant to historical romance fiction. In celebration of Women's History Month, we are highlighting authors of historical romance heroines in STEM studies and occupations. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. Not only are contemporary romance novels more focused on delivering HEAs to women in science, but historical romance novels are also sharing the romance journeys of STEM women from centuries past. What's the appeal to romance writers and readers? And why has STEM historical romance become more popular since the late 2010s? Let's meet our guests. Christina Britton is an RWA Golden Heart winner and the author of Some Dukes Have All the Luck, a Regency-era romance featuring a heroine who is an aspiring entomologist. Manda Collins is a critically acclaimed novelist and the author of Regency romance series Studies in Scandal, which features heroines in mathematics and geology. Olivia Waite is a romance fiction columnist for the New York Times Book Review and the author of queer Regency-era romance, The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics, which features a heroine who is an aspiring astronomer. Welcome all, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Hey,
Great to be here.
Thanks. I write a series of Victorian rom-coms, The Secret Scientists of London. And so I am especially fond of heroines in STEM. And I wanted to gather you all together and ask a few questions and see what are some of our similarities and what are some of the differences in how we write STEM in historical romance. Christina, I was thinking about Some Dukes Have All the Luck, which has an aspiring entomologist. How much research did you do in entomology?
I was doing quite a bit of research, especially with the specific beetle that Bronwyn was studying. She believes that she found a new species of this tansy beetle on the Isle of Sin, which is where she's living. So she's been studying it, and so I actually created a new species of tansy beetle for the book that doesn't actually exist. But I was trying to get all the specifics of the tansy beetle. I was watching a lot of videos. I was looking up a lot of pictures. I was doing a lot of research on, especially the specific beetle, just to make sure that I was getting it all right.
Had you read about entomologists during that time period and you wanted to do them some justice, or?
I didn't actually. She started out actually as a side character in A Duke Worth Fighting For, which is the final book in my Isle of Sin series. And she was, this quirky little character that I immediately fell in love with. And everybody they kind of thought she was really bizarre because she was really into insects, and it kind of bloomed from there. I really wanted to write her story, and that's where the idea kind of bloomed from. So it wasn't from any specific historical figure. It was more from having this character and just really wanting to dive deep into her passions and make a story for her.
I love it. I mean, I love that book. It's great. I think it really works.
Thank you.
And I was thinking to myself too, I have to go see what a tansy beetle is, because I kind of wondered whether, because this Isle of Sin, it doesn't really exist, I wondered whether you made the beetle up or not.
I did make this particular type of tansy beetle up, but the tansy beetle does exist and it's gorgeous. It's an absolutely beautiful beetle.
All right. So we'll have to go do a little bit of research afterwards for this.
I wanted to make sure that it was not like a gross bug. I didn't want it gross because I know some people are really squeamish and they have a thing about insects. So I wanted to make sure that the insect was also kind of pretty.
It's true. She's Christina, she's right. People get very upset when you have scary insects. In your book, I was told by one reader that I needed to have a trigger warning in the beginning of my book because there's tarantulas in it. for the first book for A Lady's
Oh,
Formula.
dear.
Now
Well,
that's
I
an
mean,
interesting.
Yes.
arachnophobia is a big deal, and when
It's a
people have
real
it, they have
thing.
it
Yes.
bad.
Yes. So I never thought of that. You're absolutely right. Now I know better.
Yeah,
Um,
I have a friend who can't even look at photos of spiders. Like, so we're like in our like cozy little social Discord, we have to like tag every spider mention.
Olivia, when I was reading your book, I was so blown away by how authentic sounding it was, me not being an astrophysicist, I don't know for sure. But also I was thinking, I wonder if Olivia was at all inspired by Carolyn Herschel.
Carolyn Herschel is where I started because she's kind of the famous one from the era. And discovering comets, and her brother discovered a planet, first woman admitted to the Royal Society. Like, her list of accomplishments is undeniable. And unfortunately, especially if you're writing a sapphic historical romance where you need two heroines, Carolyn Herschel is a terrible, terrible romance heroine. I mean, like, she mostly hangs around and is her brother's assistant. She does a lot of really fantastic work, but she corresponds mostly with men. She's really distrustful when her brother got married. And then at the end of her life, she ended up like moving back to Germany after her brother's death. And it's all very kind of like insular. Like, she really was all about the work. Which was really interesting. But if you're looking for something to like hang an emotional plot on, not so much. But in the course of this, like, the year she was awarded by the Royal Society, they honored another female astronomer and scientist named Mary Somerville. Mary Somerville is perfect for a romance novel heroine. She's self-taught. She was beautiful enough that it was like she was nicknamed the Rose of Jedburgh when she was growing up. Her first husband refused to support her scientific pursuits. She had already taught herself Greek and Latin from a library, like from her father's library books. Her second husband, after the first one died, absolutely supported her. And then she went on to, just like Lucy does in Ladies' Guide, Mary Somerville began translating Laplace's book on celestial mechanics, and made such a good translation/expansion of it that it became the textbook that Oxford used to teach the subject for the next 70 years. She's also, incidentally, the mathematics tutor for Ada Lovelace. She was, in fact, the first person for whom the term scientist was coined, because at the time you would refer to yourself as a man of science, right? Like a man of learning, et cetera, et cetera. But she clearly couldn't be a man of science, so what do we call her? So William, whose last name I cannot for the life of me remember, coined the word scientist about Mary Somerville because he couldn't call her a man of science in a review.
That
And
is
so
fascinating.
yeah, and it was this huge, and I'm like, everybody gets so excited about Carolyn Herschel, and people forget Mary Somerville. And I'm like, this is exactly the problem, and it's so infuriating. Like, so I've become kind of this Mary Somerville evangelist.
Yeah, she came up a lot in my research when I was doing research.
Yeah.
Mary Somerville started the first one for women, and it was almost
Oh.
like a YMCA, I think, at one point, like, that women would go and stay there. And yeah. Fascinating.
Awesome.
Olivia, can you tell us really quick about the plot of Celestial Mechanics?
Sure. So you have your young astronomer named Lucy, and her father has just died. She'd been working with him. He was the well-known famous astronomer in the family. But toward the end of his life, she'd been doing all of the heavy-duty mathematics. Because at the time, and sometimes modern scientists will ding me for being inaccurate about what astronomers do. And I'm like, no, this is literally what astronomers were doing in the 1820s. Like, I'm sorry, of course we're not doing it now. We did it all before. Like, we don't have to build scientific calculation tables because we have calculators and computers. But at the time, those were absolutely cutting edge tech, like sheets and sheets of numbers and positions and mathematical calculations. Bit of a tangent, sorry. Lucy's brother is threatening to sell her telescope. She is hoping to kind of make her mark as her own person rather than just working under her father's aegis. So she decides, she gets a letter from this countess that her father used to correspond with. The countess's husband and Lucy's father used to belong to a scientific society together. The Countess is looking for someone to translate this particular French astronomical text as kind of her last association with this scientific society. Like, in honor of my husband's legacy, here's this big project. Do you know someone who could do this work? And Lucy's like, well, I could do this work. So she heads to London and volunteers herself for the translation. Well, the scientific society rejects it. Catherine, our widowed countess, thinks they rejected Lucy for no reason. So she pulls her funding, gives the money to Lucy, and is like, this is now your job. And then over the course of translating this book and working through what's going to happen with Lucy being a woman doing science very publicly, they fall in love.
Perfect. That's a perfect summary. I love it. Amanda, you have a geologist and a mathematician, and they're part of the series. They're all four of the friends are gifted,
right,
from this benefactor. So can you talk about that and then talk about why you chose those STEM fields?
Okay. So the premise of the series is that there is a very wealthy woman who wants to bequeath her estate to have 4 female scholars come and live at her estate and compete to find out which of them will win possession of the estate. But what ends up happening is that she leaves each of them a bequest of a puzzle to solve. So they each have a puzzle to solve. So there's a linguist, a mathematician, an artist, and a anthropologist. Yeah. One of them in the second book, Duke with Benefits, Daphne is a mathematician, and in the 4th book, Gemma is the anthropologist. And I chose those because they were sciences that women were making strides in the 19th century. So it was something that I knew was doable for, like, not doable in that they were capable of it, but in that there were fields that women were making strides in during that era. And just put out there, I'm very much not a math science person. I'm an English major all the way. I did okay in math in high school, but I don't remember any of it. So having to write characters who were smarter in fields than I am was difficult, but I think I pulled it off because it was just pure fakery. It's smoke and mirrors. But so yeah, so that was why I chose those 2.
So that kind of leads into something else I was interested in from all 3 of you is how, like, in terms of like research. I know for me, I do a ton of research, and then it turns out that half the research doesn't support what I want to do with my characters. So I have to make that choice between like period appropriate and, hijinks. So
right.
So when I'm thinking about your mathematician, and she, I don't know if you based on anyone, but she seemed to me that she was almost on the spectrum. Was that part of
Yes.
research?
Yes.
Why did you make that choice? Was it because she was a mathematician and that's what you found? Or
when I set up a series like that, I try to have characters who were all very different personality wise. And I had never done somebody on the spectrum before. And I think I had been watching like some TV shows with, like, I can't remember the name of the show, but it was like a detective show where one of the guys was a mathematician, and he was like smathy and like quirky. And so I was trying to do that. And actually, I think when I pitched this series, I pitched it as the Big Bang Theory, which I'm really terrible at pitching things because I pitch things like high concept on shows that I've never actually really watched.
That's
So But I thought she was if anyone, she is the Sheldon type, like in that she's just, so yeah, there was nothing more than that. I'm
Stina,
sorry to say.
your heroine is not is also considered to out there, like on the fringes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wrote her to be on the spectrum, but she definitely is considered odd by everyone else in society. And when you were researching scientists, was that why you wrote her the way that you did, or did the one thing lead into the other? Do you know what I'm saying?
The personality and the scientific knowledge kind of came hand in hand, just her quirkiness and her oddness, the way that people saw her. And it actually wound up being a lot of her backstory, where people like really didn't understand her. Her parents were very socialite, they're very social climbing, um, very, outgoing, and she was always very introverted, and nobody really understood her interests. So she kind of turned to nature and insects because they didn't judge her and stuff like that. So that was basically where she got the personality and the scientific passion kind of went hand in hand with each other. I didn't intend um to make her on the spectrum or anything. But it kind of started to come out the more I got into her character, that she has this way of thinking that even her best friends, the Oddments, who is the group of females, of the women that she is best friends with, even they don't quite understand her, just because of the way that she thinks. So
Christina, did you get a chance to discuss more of the plot of your novel?
Some Dukes Have All the Luck is basically the story of Miss Bronwyn Pickering, and she has this desire and this passion to become a naturalist. She wants to join the Royal Society of London, which at the time did not allow women. And so she's doing all these studies. She's really throwing herself into it, and her parents are really insistent that she marry and marry well, because they want to go up in society. So they go to throw away all of her scientific equipment, and they threaten to send her away to live with her brother far, far away from the Isle of Sin. So she decides, okay, maybe I should, enter into a marriage of convenience with this guy who just proposed to me, who just ran into me and proposed to me. So Ash, he runs into Bronwyn, and he basically says, well, you get along with my three very troublesome wards, and they're driving me crazy, and I need somebody to take care of them, and all of the governesses and all of the people that I have hired to watch over them, they keep running them off. So, but they love you. So will you marry me? And it's basically their second meeting that he proposes to her. So she says, well, okay, this might work. I'll be able to stay on the Isle of Sin, and I'll be able to continue with my studies. And it's just a marriage of convenience. I don't have to deal with this guy anymore. I can just keep with my studies. So they wind up marrying, but she insists on a marriage in truth for 2 weeks for science.
Ah,
Because
Clever.
obviously she's
Science.
a naturalist, right? For science.
The best.
Because she's a naturalist, so she's studied the mating,
Mhm.
mammals and insects and birds and everything. She studied how they mate, so she'd like to know what happens when the Homo sapiens mate. So there you go.
I was going to say, Olivia, do you think that's part of the appeal? Do you think that's part of why we have gravitated towards writing our heroines in STEM, is because they are that much different? Maybe, like, I know we try and stay away from the not like the other girl trope, but I think I read these characters and I write these characters, and they're not They're not. They're definitely, even now, even today, look at, there's only 16% of engineers are women, right? So these are women who, and the women engineers that I know, are different. They do think differently. They do see different things. Do you see that? Is that part of the reason that drew you to it, or do you see that as something you have to overcome?
Well, for me, one of the reasons that I was drawn to writing about an astronomer is that I've always found astronomy incredibly beautiful. I am not rigorous enough in my methods to be a scientist. I am absolutely made to be a fiction writer, but I love the poetry that's in astronomy. I love the history of it. I love the history of science more generally, just because there's so many times where we've gotten it wrong. And I find that fascinating. So I love all of the outmoded theories and the ideas that we had that turned out not to be true. And the other thing that really interests me and that comes up in Ladies Guide is the point where science and art really meet. Lucy is an astronomer and a scientist. Catherine is an embroiderer, and it becomes an art. Lucy's brother is also an artist. So this idea of like science versus art kind of as being weighed differently as cultural value and weighed differently depending on who's doing them. So when you talked about 60% of only 60% of engineers are male, is what you said. Yes, like 60% of engineers are men.
Are female, so only 16%.
Oh, 16% of engineers
The
are female.
rest
Yeah.
are male. Yeah.
But women have been interested in engineering. Like I remember growing up, I was interested in engineering. Women have been interested in science. Women have been interested in all of these STEM careers for as long as these STEM careers have existed. There were times where these careers were strongly female. You think of the female computers at NASA, and you think about all of the women who came to become naturalists through things like scientific illustration and observation. Mary Delaney, who did collages of flowers at the end of the 18th century, and she did paper cut collages that were so detailed that they still use them as like species examples. And they're stunning pieces of art, but they're also stunning pieces of scientific observation. So for me, I'm always trying to kind of push back against this false choice that women interested in science have to be exceptional. What ends up happening is they start to get involved and then they're hit with this wall of bigotry and bias and prejudice that just becomes overwhelming, and it either chases them out of the industry, which happens to a lot. Like the reason why you have 16% is not because women aren't interested, they're not trying, it's because men are shutting them out. It's because they're being like pushed aside and demanded more of. And this happens across every axis of oppression. You talk about Black scientists and disabled scientists have these same, they call them pipeline problems, but it's not a pipeline problem, it's a retention issue. So I always try to push back against any framing that sets up science and art as kind of separate spheres and that values science over art. I think that whole structure is part of what's kind of made this such a struggle for so many centuries.
I was thinking about that, and you all have written them partners who say, you're a little strange, but I love you. And I get people saying, but how common do you think that was? I mean, Amanda, did anyone say to you, yeah, but a Duke would never?
I didn't really get much pushback about them. That's actually one of my most beloved books. And I've had readers refer to that type of pairing as reverse Grumpy Sunshine, which makes me like, I'm sorry, what? Like,
no, not grumpy at all. Oh my God.
I know. So like, yes, it's Grumpy Sunshine for sure, but like Grumpy Sunshine can come in any iteration.
Yeah.
Like it,
Yeah,
there's no reverse about it.
Right.
You can't reverse the
right.
No,
Yeah. So, but I do think that they're just a pretty typical Grumpy Sunshine, and he is actually like, he's like a Bertie Wooster of a character, just like a total, bless his heart. Like, I mean, he's not dumb, but he's not like he's not a genius, and he's just like a, hail fellow, well met, your average
I love those heroes.
aristocrat.
And
Yeah.
he's not holding her intelligence against her, and he's not, and
Mhm.
he's like, that's
Yeah.
what it's part of your quirks and your difference is part of what I love about
Right.
you.
Yeah.
And he's not in competition. Like, he also, I think why he fits with her so well is because he's never, like, part of it is because he's a duke, and he's never felt like he had to really compete with other people because he's a duke. But also he's just like he knows he's not the smartest guy in the room, and he's okay with that. He's accepted himself for how he is, and like he loves that she's super smart. Like, that's really awesome to him. And like, so yeah, like they're a good team in that way. And like the fact that he accepts her, she likes that, but she also like she likes that he's not like, constantly like trying to one up her in the way that some other men do, like, which is like, I think I write a lot of betas just because I just really hardcore alphas really get on my last nerve. And so like I can read them sometimes, but in real life, like they are just they bring out my oh, they just drive me insane. And so like to me, like the perfect partner is one who is going to be your partner and not going to try to like, be in charge all the time. And so to me, that was why they were such a good pair.
So, Christina, I'm going to ask you that because also your Duke he's not Bertie Wooster kind, but he definitely is not in competition, like with her at all. His admiration of her is unfeigned. It's real. And do you think that, I mean, and Olivia, I want to ask you this afterwards too. Do you guys think that one of the reasons that if we write STEM female main characters, that their partners shouldn't be in the same, it won't work if they're in the same field. It won't work if they are in competition. Is that why you kind of, they have a power differential there, obviously, because Bryony's not noble and the Duke has a title, but also he's not interested in etymology. Like they're never going to conflict in that way.
I don't think that really matters. I think it would matter as long as he supports her. I think that they could absolutely, I would think
Yeah.
in my personal opinion that they could absolutely be in the same field as long as he doesn't try to one up her, as long as he doesn't try to look down on her, talk down to her, as long as he respects her as an equal. I think it totally work. With Ash and Bronwyn, he was like part owner in a gaming hall, Duke, very reluctant Duke type of person. But he absolutely respects her for everything that she does. There's times that he would just, lay next to her while she's doing her work and just, watch her and just smile and just support her. And then there was the whole Beauty and the Beast library scene where he gifts her the library so that she could do her research there and turn it into her haven and stuff like that. So I think that as long as a hero really respects the heroine for her work and doesn't talk down to her and sees her as, just absolutely respects her for her mind and her brain and what she can do, I think it could work either way. Yeah.
What do you think, Olivia? Because your heroines are not in competition with each other, but also there's a level of there's one moment where Lucy makes a like somewhat derogatory comment about art.
Yeah.
And
And it's because, like, I mean, she's loved science for so long, she can't imagine anything else. And she has to kind of come to realize that there are similarities between science and art, that they're both communities of practice, I think is the term. Like, like science isn't better than art just because of the, like, science gets the better press, kind of. I don't know. For me, it wasn't that they were in competition, but they absolutely were in conflict, especially at the start. And Catherine has her own baggage because her husband used science as kind of one of the levers to, like, squash her down and keep her small and subordinate. So she has a very natural aversion to a lot of, like, scientific apparatuses and a lot of, like, to being a partner with somebody who uses science as a means of control. And that is part of the history of science as well. We love to think of it as, like, science is the exploration of truth, and it's true that it is, but science is also practiced by people, and it's prone to some of the worst things that people can do. Like, the name of, like, scientific racism exists, the whole eugenics problem. All of these were built in to the start, the way that science was used to expand the British Empire. That's a whole other talk, but
Yeah.
but what Catherine and Lucy kind of have to come to realize is that they don't have to bring all of this baggage with them. Like, art is, like, science has been forbidden to Lucy, so she's really, like, pushing toward it. And science has been used as a weapon against Catherine, so she's really, like, pushing against it. And they have to work out how that tension resolves in their relationship.
So I know that I'm writing 2 more books about STEM heroines. It's not the same. It's like a spin-off series, because I'm getting them out of Athena's Retreat, which was that secret club for women scientists, because I couldn't write that anymore. But I would say the bulk of one-on-one feedback I get from readers are readers who are like, thank you for writing about STEM. I'm so excited about this. Are you getting feedback on those STEM characters? Are people asking you to write more?
I think people really love just seeing women in historicals doing any kind of job. Like, I know Kat Sebastian's been doing a lot. Rose Lerner has a whole series of, like, Regency small towns where, okay, like, 2 people have a title. It's Lady Tassel and her son, and I think he's the hero of the first book. But everybody else is, like,
A newspaper,
everything in between. There's, like, a newspaper lady. There's the baker who owns the Honeymoon Cafe. There's a lovely, lovely romance between a butler and a housemaid who get married so that they can take jobs in a pastor's house. Because Lady Tassel has, like, fired them both. But it's yeah, so they arrange this marriage of convenience because it's the only job they can find, and then they end up, falling in love.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful, and it's full of all these really incredible details, and there's so much world in the Regency. I wrote a ton of books in ballrooms, especially when I was starting out, before I started writing the queer romances. And the titled world is super fun, and you get all the clothing and you get that sense of fantasy, but I think people are finding more and more spaces where, like, the interesting, like, boots on the ground stuff is happening. So I think that's where a lot of the women in STEM, like, enthusiasm comes from. It's because, like, oh my gosh, they're trying something new, they're trying something different. I think there's just so much to explore. I mean, it's been real fun.
What do you think has happened within the last so many years that has contributed to the STEM movement? Because I had never heard of STEM. I mean, obviously I had science in school years ago, but I noticed in recent years, STEM it was becoming a buzzword that you heard more of. What has happened in the world that has brought that to the forefront?
I think it has a lot to do with the political climate. Certain parties who are trying to kind of drag us back to an age where women didn't have as much power, where people of color did not have as much power, and they're trying to bring us back to that. And I think that the push towards women in political office and the push towards women in STEM, I think that has a lot to do with it. People are really passionate and are kind of pushing back against that and trying to make sure that we are not getting pulled back into this black hole that, That's what I think.
I feel like some of it started coming out after the women in gaming controversy several years
Yeah.
ago,
Okay.
where there was within the computing gaming world, there was a lot of anti-woman sentiment and with coding and jobs for women in tech. And I feel like there was some pushback with women who were actually doing the job in tech who felt like, hey, we're here. So there was a push from them to kind of get the word out about STEM and get women more involved in STEM and in
Right.
coding
Okay.
and gaming.
Mhm.
There's an educational piece to this. I know from my time in university, but also from having 3 kids go through the educational system, there became more of a global focus on women in science, partly because we became more global. So the student bodies in American universities became more diverse, and it's funny. I had a talk with Evie Dunmore. Like last year, we talked about the concept of feminism, and she rightly pointed out that these concepts are all, you think of them in terms of from the American lens. And so internationally, women are not always pushed out of science. For example, in continental India, like they're the country of India, they're I think it's 80% of women are going into medicine. I think it's close to 40 or 50% of women are in engineering. So there is a cultural piece that I think shifted as our global outlook shifted. And we kind of realized, wait a minute, hey, wait. And, then we became very American. Wait a minute, you guys got better stuff than us? You got more ladies in the sciences? Well, what about our ladies? You know what I mean? There's
We're
like
exceptional.
Uh,
I also think there was a lot of educational, like the publications coming out about how within the school systems, like within elementary and middle high school, like there was kind of women or girls were not encouraged to do STEM type work. Oh, that's not what girls do. Let little Johnny work on that calculus.
Yeah.
And
Whatever.
some of that has still, I was doing some research when the first book came out, when A Lady's Formula for Love came out, and I was doing a lot of pieces on like STEMism or whatever, however you want to. I'm okay with, what, for the most part, I'm okay with it. Sometimes I'm like, but I always throw in the fact that this is 2023, and we still lose girls before they become women from science. And it was partly what you pointed out, Olivia, which is the retention problem. But it's also, we lose them even before they start considering life choices that are going to take them out of certain professions. We lose them when those girls are like 12, 13, and 14. And that's, we all know what happens when we're, that whole tween time. You're already, you lost your mind, you live in a soup of hormones, like you don't know what's going on anyways. And so it's so easy to push them in one direction or another. And I think that only now are and I can't even speak for all schools, are they trying to bring them along in the direction of STEM.
I've read book reviews written by readers who have read historical romances featuring STEM heroines, and it seems like there have been some readers who feel that the progressive efforts of historical STEM heroines are nullified by their desire to have a romantic partner. What say you about that?
People always want to cut the idea of romance out of feminism, which is so short-sighted. And I think it's because they'd much rather talk about sex and feminism. They want to leave the romance out of it. They feel like romance. And again, I think it comes down to these weird gender labels that people have in their head, and they say science is masculine
Yeah.
and romance is feminine. So obviously these things are at odds, and it's just not the
Right.
case.
I have a lot to say about reviewers. I don't think I've ever been hit with that particular charge before. I have gotten like just that my books were too progressive, too modern. Like I don't even understand really what they're saying when they say that. I really just try not to think about it too much and just write my books and like not worry too much about like what the readers are going to say, because they're going to say what they're going to say
Right. That
no
is
matter
fair.
what I write.
I'm that petty person who likes to come armed with citations about, here's the people who were talking about free love in 1820.
Mm,
Oh yeah. No, definitely.
yeah.
And just yeah. Like nobody said cuss words in the 19th century. Oh,
Oh,
sure.
excuse me.
I don't think that having a scientific mind will take away from the absolutely human need for love and connection. So I think that it's completely ridiculous to think that somebody who might have a scientific mind would not want to find somebody to share their life with and to find happiness with another person. It's a completely normal human emotion.
Do you think that this trend of STEM heroines is going to stop being a trend and just be kind of part of the landscape of historical romance? Because I think it's a little different than contemporary romance, right? In that you have it's so much easier to find examples of women in STEM. But what do you think, Christy? Like, what has been the reaction to your heroine, and do you think you'll write more? Do you think this will become more commonplace?
I didn't initially intend to write a STEM heroine. And I'm like Manda, where my it's a lot of smoke and mirrors because I don't, I'm a very artistic bent type thing, and I don't understand a lot of like I was never good at mathematics and that type of thing. So, but I think um that we'll see a lot more of it. I'm hoping that we see a lot more of it. Um, Now that people are really focused on looking beyond the typical white male gaze of history and focusing on, you know, what women have done, what LGBTQ people have done, what people of color have done throughout history. And I'm really hoping that we see a drift more towards that. Um, yeah, so I'm hopeful.
Amanda, what about you? Do you see this as a trend that's going to continue and stop being a trend after a while, just be kind of taking it as normal?
I feel like it's always kind of been here low key. It just hasn't been labeled STEM.
Right.
And so, but I do think it's going to be around because people are, we're always looking for something new, like beyond the ballroom. And so, um, like right now, my series doesn't have any scientists in it, but my next series might. And it's just, I think we're always looking for new ways of showing women, ordinary women doing extraordinary things in history. And so um, there's always that idea. And also I just like I'm constantly writing the woman against the machine or against the man. And so like so I'm always going to be writing those kinds of stories, and Women in STEM lends itself to that because, as Olivia was saying earlier, there's always a pushback from the men to kind of keep the women in their place, mainly for competitive reasons. So yeah.
Well, I'm with Amanda because a lot of the romances that I loved growing up, and later on as well had scientist heroines long before, like Amanda Quick did a few.
Yes.
Carla
Mhm.
Kelly has a botanical illustrator in one of hers that's just absolutely
Yes.
lovely. And
Yeah.
so it is one of those things where there's, as we open up like more time periods, like from Regency to Victorian, as we start getting into like 20th century historicals, like we're seeing Emma Barry and Genevieve Turner's Fly Me to the Moon series, which has like the fictional NASA with all of the men and women who work there, and it's spectacular stuff. But I like to think that this is going to become like kind of even more visible than it has been, because I think there is so much interesting stuff that you can do with it.
There are so many stories to tell in the 16th century, in the 17th century, in the
Mhm.
18th
Yeah.
century. Like they're all there waiting for somebody to take up a pen.
Are there any upcoming historical romance releases that anyone would like to share?
Yeah, it's the second in my Sinful Spinster series. It's going to be called What's a Duke Got to Do with It? And it's not a step heroine this time, but it is the good friend of Bronwyn from book one, and she's a companion to uh, Dowager Viscountess, and it opens up basically with a man falling to his death from her bedroom window, which is fun. I really enjoyed her.
I got Autobuy right now.
Yeah, seriously.
All right.
So yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun, and just her dealing with that, because she had already had a huge scandal in her past, and now
Okay.
it's come to revisit her in
Mhm.
an even worse way. And yeah, that's what's coming up next in
Okay.
July. In July.
In July 2023. Amanda?
So March 28th, the third book in my Ladies Most Scandalous series is A Spinster's Guide to Danger and Dukes.
Yeah.
And the heroine is the assistant of the heroines of the first two books who write a crime column. And she has to run off to the country for undisclosed reasons and ends up in a fake engagement with the Duke.
Ooh.
As one
And
does.
murder ensues, as it
As one
Very soon.
always does.
Exciting. Olivia, what do you have coming up?
Well, nothing coming up, but just this past winter, I released a short sapphic Victorian. This one is Victorian, called Hen Fever. And it's about two rival chicken breeders
Mhm.
during a village Christmas poultry show. And so it's like this,
Oh my God.
like the Christmas poultry show is like the one day of the year where this doctor's daughter heroine spinster stops being good and starts being absolutely ruthless. Like, she's very wonderful, she's very sweet, she's so good that she makes everybody else a little mad about it. And then the chickens start competing, and it's like rolls up her sleeves and everything is knives kind of a thing. But she ends up in a dispute over a wild flock of hens with the group of friends that inherited a nearby manor that are just back from the Crimean War, and they're just like trying to heal from trauma. And here comes this woman who cares about the chickens, and the widowed heroine is like very upset. They've just been eating the chickens, and of course the chicken breeding heroine is incensed about this, because this is a very rare breed that Christina, you mentioned making tansy beetles.
Yeah.
I got to make up chicken breeds for this, and it was so much fun.
Thank you, Christina, Amanda, and Olivia, for sharing your insights and opinions on Unchaperoned. And thank you to our viewing audience. Be sure to subscribe and join us next month when we discuss American Gilded Age romance. Until next time.
We didn't say that together.
We didn't. We didn't.
We're supposed to also.
No, actually, well, that would be nice. Although you guys aren't going to be here next time.
Okay,
but
you're not
we
gonna
are
be
We
here
are going to be here next time.
That's a lie.
See you never.